Thank you, Delegate. I now call on the Musicians' Union to second the composite motion. Thank you, Delegate.
Thanks, President. Thanks, Chair. Callum Bear Musicians Union, seconding this composite. First thing I want to point out is all week we've heard in different contexts and all the different debates that we've had, the idea of fair work has cropped up in some way or another. Mostly it came up in the social care debate and discussion yesterday, but it was also mentioned by teachers and the treatment that they receive at work. And it was also mentioned on Monday, if you're at the Fringe meeting on transport next step, it came up in the discussion there. So across all of our sectors and all of our work, fair work is coming up regularly. We are calling for fair work to be made a reality for all creative workers in Scotland. Musicians and artists contribute enormously to our cultural and economic life, yet all too often we are treated as an afterthought when it comes to workers' rights. Many of us are freelancers or on precarious contracts with no sick pay, no job security and little protection. We regularly work anti-social hours, finishing our gigs late at night with no safe or affordable way to get home. Fair work must mean safe work, and that includes safe travel and conditions for those who work at night. We also face a culture of unpaid labour. We rehearse without pay, we promote our own shows, we prepare our performances, often funding the work ourselves. This hidden labour is expected in our profession, yet it's rarely recognised or even compensated. Congress, if fair work is to mean anything, it must apply to all sectors, including the creative industries. We're calling on the STUC to work with us to demand that fair work principles become a condition of public arts funding with proper enforcement and a clear voice for creative workers. One last thing, let's make sure that Scotland's vibrant cultural sector is underpinned by fair conditions, fair pay and respect for the people who make it thrive. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. I now call on the STUC Black Workers Conference to speak in support of the composite motion. Thanks, Raza.
Thank you, President. Congress, Raza Sadiq, Black Workers Committee. I rise to speak with urgency because the time for polite conversations about fair work is over. Unison Black Members Committee surveyed our Black members 3 times, and the message could not be clearer. Racism in workplaces is rising. Trust in our own structure is falling. Black workers are silenced by fear, and racism is being normalized through inaction. Meanwhile, Scottish Government Fair Work agenda risks becoming nothing more than a slogan. Without escalations, enforcement, it gives employers a free pass to talk about fairness while Black workers continue to suffer discriminations, isolation, and retaliation. Where are the sanctions? Where is accountability? We must ask ourselves, are we the unions doing enough? If you look around this hall and don't see real diversity, this is your answer. We cannot demand inclusivity from employers while failing to live the values ourselves. Enough is enough. STUC must lead with action, not words. We must refuse to endorse any employer's fair work first claim unless they prove real, measurable outcomes on racial equalities. Congress, if we don't act urgently, we are complicit. Fair work cannot be fair while racism thrives. Just to finish, we must be braver. We must be louder. Are we louder? As racism is still thriving, and we must call it, and we must be relentless. Please support this motion, and let's finally deliver and make fast work first to fair work first. Thank you.
Thank you, Raza. I now call on Moray Trades Union Council to speak in support of the composite motion. I now call on Prospect to speak in support of the composite motion. I now call on the GMB to speak in support of the composite motion.
President, Congress, Martin Will, GMB Scotland, seconding motion, the amended motion 67, supporting the composite. Congress, there are many Scottish Government schemes that overpromise, initiatives that fail to deliver, programmes that fall flat, but there's none that fit this bill quite so much as Fair Work. The Scottish Government promised to make Scotland a Fair Work nation by 2025, another hollow Sturgeon-era target left in tatters. Far from creating a Fair Work nation, the SNP's own council in Aberdeen have threatened the entire workforce with fire and rehire in an effort to freeze wages, which would cost the lowest paid workers roughly £1,500 a year. Fire and rehire is explicitly mentioned in the Fair Work conditions, but despite this, the Scottish Government won't even enforce the rules they themselves wrote. Fair work can be meaningful. If the Scottish Government can't enforce minimums, they can at least promote the conditions which allow trade unions to do the heavy lifting. Fair work may enshrine a minimum wage, but organised workplaces can always fight for better. We don't want to rest on floors, but break through the ceilings. If only trade unions are made the gold standard and have a clear, defined role under fair work, we can do so. Otherwise, employers will forever be able to install their own people in so-called employee committees to prove fair work compliance. There are many gaps in the Employment Rights Bill, but it's a major step. The Scottish Government is quickly running out of time to justify what fair work has achieved and what it will mean. They are either for trade unions or against us. Congress, support the amended motion and the composite. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. I now move to any opposing speakers. That was Composite K, Advancing Fair Work. Please note the General Council recommends support. I now go to the vote. Can I see all those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Composite K, Advancing Fair Work, is carried. Congress, I now move to Composite L, Extreme Weather Warnings, covering motions 72 and 73. I invite West Lothian Trade Union Council to move composite motion. Thank you, colleague.
Lewis Clark, West Lothian Trade Union Council. We've recently seen an increase in severity and occurrence of severe weather across the country, with threats to life warning being issued by the Met Office. Threat to life should be enough for employers to make the right decisions to not endanger workers during these periods. However, even with the great guiding principles of the Fair Work Charter during severe weather, employers are still choosing continued uninterrupted operations at the cost of workers' safety. There are many examples during Storm Elwyn that has shown that without legislation, exploitative employers will continue to act this way, especially to more vulnerable groups of workers. As a firefighter, I've responded to wildfire, high winds, rain, flooding events, and I can see firsthand what the risks and devastation of those events are like. Essential services will still have to run, and we can ensure that there's a legal requirement for employers to risk assess the necessity of work, and if necessary, that there are safe systems of work in place for attending and performing that work. Legislation will give our health and safety reps the power to negotiate and ensure we're all safe during these periods. For non-essential services and work, we must have legislation that ensures that they cannot be forced into making the decision to risk their lives for the non-essential work or miss a day's wage, all for the sake of making a pizza in some sense. It's a good point right now to notice the great work that the unions did during Storm Elwyn. Unite Hospitality is one that jumped out to me. They were really calling out the exploitative workers and supporting the workers who were taking action, saying that it is not safe to go to work, so I'm not going. And I'll commend their work that they've done on that. We've done this swiftly before, forced into it by the risk to life that was presented by COVID. With foreseeable and very precedented events, it's reasonable to expect that planning and safe system works are in place for these events. It's the very essence of what workplace health and safety is actually about. So let's protect our workers, protect their wages, and get legislation to back it up. Please support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. I now call the STUC Youth Conference to second the composite motion. Formally. Formally? Thank you. I now call on any opposing speakers. That was Composite L, extreme weather warnings. Please note the General Council recommends support. I'll now move you to take you to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. Any against? Any abstentions? Composite L, extreme weather warnings, is carried. I now call on motion 75, recognition in renewables and just transition. I invite Prospect to move the motion.
Thank you, President. Good afternoon, Congress. Ian Perth, Prospect Union, moving motion 75, recognition in renewables, in renewable energy and just transition. Congress, there are thousands of members in the renewables energy sector, represented by STUC affiliate unions. The sector will become even more important to our movement and our society in the years ahead. However, large numbers of these workers are unacceptably locked out of collective bargaining. Delegates, we all know that workplaces with collective bargaining are safer workplaces, and due to collective bargaining and pay transparency, they're usually more equal workplaces. As efforts intensify towards net zero, employers and government must be reminded that a fair and just transition means high-quality jobs with decent employers where workers have a voice and an ability to negotiate their pay collectively through unions. Delegates, jobs in the renewable sector must not have inferior terms and conditions. Employers that refuse collective bargaining to union members and fight our efforts to achieve recognition display their real motivation and commitment to the just transition process. They display contempt for the environment, society, and contempt for a genuine just transition. Employers who resist collective bargaining should be treated with suspicion and called out at every opportunity by trade unions and politicians. The energy sector is vital, safety-critical industry, vital to all of our lives. While it's not yet clear what caused the catastrophe in Spain and Portugal this week, the chaos gives a glimpse of the consequences when things go wrong, and the value of the top-class comrades in Spain, engineers and energy professionals who got the lights back on quickly. Scotland's energy professionals demand respect. Employers cannot be allowed to silence the collective voice of union members in renewables. Delegates, the proliferation of personal contracts is a major problem across the private sector economy in Scotland. In the renewable sector, this practice is rife. Unfortunately, the refusal of collective bargaining and recognition in the renewable sector is not just limited to small fly-by-night international investors. Disgracefully, one of the largest energy employers in this country, Scottish Power, despite having long-standing recognition for workers in the more traditional areas, Scottish Power Renewables and their Spain-based owners Iberdrola disgracefully continue to block all union members out of collective bargaining and instead insist on all employees signing individual personal contracts. This cannot go on. Congress, we seek your support as we highlight and escalate these matters in the months ahead. Please support motion 75. I move.
Thank you, Delegate. I now call for a formal secretary for the motion. Thank you. I now call on any opposing speakers. That was motion 75, recognition in renewables and just transition. Please note that the General Council recommends support. I'll now move to the vote. Can I see all those in favour? Thank you. Any against? Any abstentions? Motion 75, recognition in renewables and just transition, is carried. I now call amended motion 77, domestic abuse, as a workplace issue. I invite the British Dietetics Association to move the amended motion. Thank you, Simon.
President Congress, Simon Fever from the British Dietetic Association. I don't want to be disrespectful to the motion that we're putting forward, but I will be respectful that our time is limited this afternoon. But there were over 60,000 domestic abuse incidents reported to the police last year in Scotland. In 81% of those incidents, there was a female victim and a male perpetrator. Incidents are on the increase, and more alarmingly is that the perpetrators are getting younger. Many of the victims are also targeted whilst at work. 94% of BDA members in Scotland are women, and the justice system is failing victims of domestic abuse. Long delays in cases getting through the court system and the failings of the police service themselves is well known. Much has been done in raising awareness and the provision of support, including the Domestic Abuse Act in 2018 and 2021, which provides us with a welcome framework but still contains holes in the legislation. For example, there is no statutory requirement for employers to have a domestic abuse policy or guidance, and ACAS guidance merely recommends that employers consider the adoption of such a policy. It is now more than ever important that employers are knowledgeable about domestic abuse, as they are ideally placed to offer support and have a duty of care. We call on Congress and the STUC to call for a statutory duty on employers to adopt workplace domestic abuse policies that include a commitment to training, zero tolerance of abuse, and appropriate support for victims. I move amended motion 77. Thank you, Congress.
Thank you. I now call on PCS to second the amended motion. PCS to second the amended motion. Thank you.
Thank you, President. Congress, Sharon McLean speaking on behalf of PCS to support amended motion 77, domestic violence as a workplace issue. Conference, coercive control is defined as a pattern of behaviour intended to intimidate, threaten or manipulate a person, often creating dependency and stripping away their sense of self. This can include such actions such as monitoring their movements, isolating them from friends and family, and controlling all aspects of daily life. Coercive behaviour is a common thread in all forms of domestic abuse and is crucial for workplaces to have a robust and clear policies to support affected employees. Coercive behaviour is well known to be difficult to identify that some aspects of abuse. But as a trade unionist, we cannot stand by just because it's difficult. A stark statistic is to consider is that 1 in 4 women experience domestic abuse in one form or another. On the 1st of April 2019, the Domestic Abuse Act came into place. At the time, groundbreaking, yet policies that would assist those impacted by this insidious act clearly do not recognise clear coercive behaviour. But again, why would they when the EHRC is silent and neither is it recognised in any Cabinet Office guidance which implements the Workers' Protections Act 2023. We need safe, trauma-informed handling of formal processes and have specialist training in order to assist identifying that coercive behaviour. Congress, we must campaign to ensure there's a statutory duty for employers to adopt workplace domestic abuse policies that must explicitly reference coercive control. Please support this motion.
Thank you, colleague. I now call on any opposing speakers in the debate. That was amended motion 77, domestic abuse as a workplace issue. Please note the General Council recommends support. I'll now move you to the vote. Can I see all those in favour? Thank you. Any against? Any abstentions? Amended motion 77, domestic abuse is a workplace issue, is carried. I now call motion 78, SLAPS. I invite the NUJ to move the motion.
Thank you, President Congress. Simon Barrow, National Union of Journalists, moving motion 78 on SLAPS, which stands for Strategic Lawsuits Against Public Participation. And strategic lawsuits against public participation do what it says on the can. They are an attempt by those who are rich and powerful to silence people who might criticise them and hold them to account. They affect trade unionists, they affect reporters, they affect commentators, writers, researchers, NGOs, campaigners, everyone who is trying to make sure that those with vast concentrations of corporate interest don't get to silence free speech. In terms of Scotland, perhaps the most famous recent case in recent years anyway, affected Andy Whiteman, the land campaigner and former MSP, who wrote an article about a company called Wildcat Haven Enterprises, who was selling off souvenir plots of land that had actually no legal basis in Scots law. He wrote that. They sued him for £750,000, and it would also have had the effect of getting him struck off as an MSP. And he had to raise £170,000 just to be able to fight the case. He won. That was the good news. The bad news was that the company then, of course, went into liquidation, and money is still owed from that, even though he won the case and he won his legal expenses. And that illustrates what SLAPs are about. The Scottish Government, when it was first put to them, said, well, we don't really need to do anything because there aren't many of these cases coming to court. But the whole point is that the majority of them don't come to court because people are silenced and intimidated, and that's why we must stop it. This is a local and a global issue. Globally, it's worth mentioning that in the US, 33 states, the District of Columbia and Guam have outlawed SLAPs. In May 2024, the European Directorate General of Justice and Consumers passed new rules against SLAPs, particularly targeting cross-border attempts to silence legitimate free speech, critical reporting, and public access to information. At a UK level here, it is true that the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Act 2023 has strengthened corporate criminal liability and access to information. That's good, but it's not nearly enough. The current government said, or the members who are now in the current government said that they would take action, but actually this wasn't in the programme of government. So we have to put huge pressure on the UK government. Also the Scottish government, thanks to the work of former MP Roger Mullin, the Petitions and Public Participation Committee took it up. Lots of us gave evidence, including, of course, the NUJ. It's now gone into pre-legislative consultation. That's active at the moment, and we have to press the Scottish Parliament and the Scottish Government to make sure that that presses into effective legislation against SLAPs. Please support this motion.
Thank you, Delegate. I now call for a formal seconder for the motion. Thank you. I now call on any opposing speakers in the motion. That was motion 78, SLAPs. Please note the General Council recommends support. I'll now move to the vote. Can I see all those in favour? Thank you. Any against? Any abstentions? Motion 78, SLAPs, is carried. Delegates will now move to emergency motions. I call emergency motion 1, Turkish oppression, Kurdish self-determination and Free Orsalan campaign. Can I invite Dundee Trade Union Council to move the emergency motion? Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, President. President Congress Mike Arnott, Dundee Trade Union Council, moving emergency motion number 1, Turkish oppression, Kurdish self-determination and the Free Orsalan campaign. Delegates, this emergency motion attempts to pull together different strands from developments of recent weeks. Firstly, touching on this Congress's long-standing support for the campaign to free Abdullah Öcalan from his Turkish jail on Imrali Island. Secondly, on our previous condemnation of the regime of Turkey's President Erdogan for political oppression, and also including issues arising from the fall of the Assad regime in Syria. After last year's Congress, we joined trade unions, lawyers, politicians and progressive voices from across the world in voicing our concern that Öcalan had been denied access to his family and legal team and that no one had seen him alive for more than 2 years. Earlier this year, these restrictions were lifted. And on the 27th of February, Öcalan proposed a groundbreaking ceasefire in Turkey and the possible dissolution of the PKK, the Kurdish Workers' Party. He has been able to discuss these potential peace moves in person with a delegation from the Dem Party. The Dem delegation has since put these proposals to all Turkish opposition parties who have reacted positively, and also to President Erdogan. This unilateral initiative and the responses to it could offer an end to a conflict with a long and bloody history and which has continued since the last peace talks were wrecked by Turkey a decade ago. Erdogan has still to respond. His intentions on relaxing the restrictions on Öcalan are as yet unclear, but despite his seemingly contradictory actions in arresting his main electoral opponent, Erkem İmamoğlu, imprisoning further trade unions and journalists, and to continuing to bomb the PKK in Iraq, we must grasp this opportunity and pressurise the British government to respond positively. It is now even more urgent that Öcalan is released so that he can lead the Kurdish negotiating side in this process. We note also the new agreement between the Syrian Democratic Forces and Syria's interim president Ahmed al-Sharaa, which covers continuing Kurdish autonomy in north and east Syria, including Rojava, the protection of the Trinsan Dam and the two Kurdish majority neighbourhoods in Aleppo. But we should also maintain caution about the new regime in Syria based on its origins and following the horrendous massacres in Alawite and other areas. Congress, please support this motion and its vision for peace in Turkey, in Rojava and the Kurdish areas of Syria, and in Iraq. Demand that the British government takes action to foster that hope of peace. Delegates, please study Öcalan and his prison writings. Please learn about Rojava and find inspiration in the struggles of the Kurdish women's protection units and their victories over ISIS, in the way democratic confederalism is built on the central role of women, on religions and ethnicities being represented and working together, and on protecting the environment. Free Öcalan, I move.
Thank you, Mike. I now call for a formal seconder for the emergency motion. Thank you. I now call on any opposing speakers in the debate. That was emergency motion 1, Turkish oppression, Kurdish self-determination and Free Öcalan campaign. Please note that the General Council recommends support. I'll now take you to the vote. Can I see all those in favour? Thank you. Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you. Emergency motion 1, Turkish oppression, Kurdish self-determination and Free Öcalan campaign is carried. I now call emergency motion 5, solidarity with Indian workers. I invite North Lanarkshire Trade Union Council to move the emergency motion. Drew, thank you.
Thank you. Conference Drew Gilchrist, North Lanarkshire Trades Council. The international situation has been referred to many times this afternoon. Growing military tension and a spread of reactionary nationalism has grown throughout the world. The brutal attacks against the people of Kashmir is to be condemned, and the workers of India need our solidarity. However, the same racist and reactionary forces that saw racist hatred in the West are at play in India. The Indian national bourgeoisie is more than eager to use racial and religious tension to turn anger away from their failings to care for workers and the most vulnerable. It's an age-old trick. So, comrades, the STUC must lead the way in supporting progressive and anti-reactionary forces in India, and we must support the Indian Workers Association of Great Britain in their work. I move the motion.
Thanks, Drew. I now call for a formal seconder for the motion. Thank you. I now call on any opposing speakers. That was emergency motion 5, solidarity with Indian workers. Please note the General Council recommends support. I will now take you to the vote. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you. Emergency motion 5, solidarity with Indian workers is carried. I now call emergency motion T, welfare benefit cuts, covering emergency motions 2 and 6. I invite the STUC Disabled Workers Conference to move the emergency composite. Thank you.
President Conference Tony Stead, STUC Disability Committee, to move Comp T, and it gives me no great pleasure. I'll cut this short and sweet to not to take time. I was brought up in the basis that the Labour Party was a party for the working class, but these decisions I've taken totally changes that, as makes me want to think about never voting again. Colleagues, the words are the words. To save conference time, I move.
Thank you, Delegate. I now call on the PCS to second the emergency composite.
President Congress Martin Cavanagh on behalf of PCS to second composite T. I make it absolutely clear, comrades, that an attack on disabled people is an attack on trade unionists. An attack on trade unionists is an attack on disabled people. And when the Labour government in Westminster announced these devastating potential cuts in March, they sent a message. They sent a message that despite their promises in the run-up to the election, that they weren't interested in the working class, they weren't interested in looking after people who are impoverished or those who are struggling the most. They're more interested in looking after big business. Because, comrades, their stated aim, allegedly, in cutting disabled benefits is to try and get more people back into work. Well, anyone who knows the first thing about PIP, for example, knows that their planned cuts will reduce the number of people with disabilities who can get into the workplace in their tens of thousands. And comrades, rather than look into the pockets of the poor, they'd be better off looking into the bank accounts of the rich if there's a cut in if there's problems in public spending. So we give a very simple message, comrades. Do not cut top-ups to universal credit by £47 a week. Do not restrict eligibility to PIP. Don't remove eligibility to disability benefits for young people as if those 22 and under can't somehow be sick or have disability. And don't pretend that these cuts will not impoverish tens of thousands, if not more, of disabled people and their families. And comrades, I will finish with this. PCS has a proud history of not only protecting our own members, but working with disability groups, and we'll continue to do it. So I would urge every single delegation in this room to take this message back to your unions. This is not about PCS, it's not about disability members, it's about humanity, it's about justice. This is only a green paper. We can defeat it. Solidarity, comrades.
Thank you, Delegate. I now call on any opposing speaker. That was emergency motion T, welfare benefit cuts, covering emergency motions 2 and 6. Please note the General Council recommends support. I'll now take you to the vote. Can I see all those in favour? Thank you. Any against? Any abstentions? Emergency motion T, welfare benefit cuts, covering emergency motion 2 and 6 is carried. I now call on emergency composite U, legal protection for gender identity and trans rights, covering emergency motions 4 and 8. I invite the STUC LGBT+ Workers Conference to move the emergency composite. Thank you, Michael.
President Congress, this motion addresses an urgent growing concern, the need for robust, explicit legal protections for gender identity and trans rights. When the UK Supreme Court issued its judgment in For Women Scotland Limited versus the Scottish Ministers, it ruled that protected characteristic of sex in the Equality Act 2010 refers to biological sex. While the court claimed this does not remove protection for trans people, let's be clear, this ruling is already being weaponised. We've seen politicians, the media and even the interim guidance for the Equality and Human Rights Commission spin this decision to justify discriminatory practices. Let's not pretend that this is neutral. It is an attack couched in legal language on the rights and dignity and safety of our trans community. On Monday, Congress overwhelmingly backed our motion on the biased cash review. I said then, and I'll say it again now, guidance and legislation that directly affects trans people are being issued with little or no consultation that those who live this reality. As trade unionists, we believe in the principle of nothing about us without us. That principle is being ignored. As a proud and unwavering trans ally, I've been speaking to and, more importantly, listening to our trans members. And let me tell you, Congress, they are frightened. They're exhausted and they're furious. And who can blame them? In unison, over the last few years, we've led a powerful campaign for trans equality. We set out to train around 500 trans allies. Up to today, we've trained over 70,000 activists, 7,000 activists, not 70,000, who have taken up that call. And what we do ask of those allies, we ask them to stand beside our trans colleagues, to stand behind them when they need support, and to stand in front of them when they need protection. Now is one of those moments. Now is the time to be in front of them. In the case of Taylor versus Jaguar Land Rover, the employment court clarified that non-binary and gender-fluid people fell under the protected characteristic of gender reassignment. But even now, this protection is inferred. It's not explicit, and that is not good enough. We need clear, unambiguous legislation that sets out the rights of trans, non-binary and gender diverse, which is in black and white and no grey areas. No legal loopholes and no room for misinterpretation. Every single person has the right to live and work free from discrimination, harassment, regardless of their gender identity. That is a fundamental principle of equality, dignity and justice. And let us be honest, this Supreme Court ruling has been celebrated by politicians and media outlets who see it as a green light for further exclusion. We cannot and will not allow this to stand unchallenged. Solidarity with trans, non-binary and gender diverse people must be a cornerstone of our movement. Just as we oppose racism, sexism, homophobia, biphobia, ableism, so too we must oppose transphobia in all its forms. This is not a fringe issue. This is a workplace issue, a trade union issue, a trade council issue, and a human rights issue. Our commitment to equality cannot depend on whether the law agrees with us. We all know too well that laws can be unjust. Courts can get it wrong, and that's why we must lead and not follow. When it comes to the rights and inclusion, the law must catch up with lived reality. It must evolve to reflect contemporary understandings of gender, and it must be shaped with the voices of trans people at the centre, not as an afterthought, but as leaders in the process. Congress, we cannot allow decisions that affect the daily lives of trans people to be made behind closed doors in rooms where they are not present. That is not democracy. This is not justice. So let's go back to our unions, our branches, our communities. Let's be loud, let's be visible. Let's show our trans members that we've got their backs. Congress, please support this motion and let's stand in solidarity. Stand for justice and let's stand for our trans community and every day. Thank you, Congress.
Thanks, Michael. I now call on your CU to second the emergency composite. Thanks, Marion.
Marion Hirsch, University and College Union, seconding the composite. I've been moved and inspired by all the solidarity for trans rights, for trans members during Congress. It's really wonderful, but it needs to continue to combat this threat. I'm proud to stand in front of you as a non-binary worker, a non-binary trade unionist, member of UCU, and to know that the collected trade unions here are not going to discriminate against me and to react negatively to this declaration. But that's not always true in the rest of society, and legally, I don't really exist. We all benefit from diversity. This is a human rights and equality issue, but equally the presence of trans members, non-binary members, members of all genders and none in our movement strengthens us, brings amazing things to us, and anything that disadvantages, discriminates against any member, any group of members, weakens us. This is a massive threat to us, to all of us, not just trans and non-binary members, but it's also a call to action. Often threats lead to revolution, though what's being asked here isn't revolutionary. We're asking for rights, legal reform, so that everyone, whatever their gender status, whatever the relationship of this to biology is, has rights, is treated with respect in the workplace and outside, and isn't discriminated against. So this composite calls on a massive campaign, a massive programme of action, which we all need to get involved in. So vote for the motion and then go out and organise and take action.
Thank you, Delegate. I now call on any opposing speaker in the debate. Thanks, Kate.
Kate Ramsden. I'm not actually from Aberdeen Trade Union Council, not actually opposing the motion. I'm seeking some clarification. Is that acceptable?
You want to move a point of order, Kate?
A point of order? Yes, please.
Clarification.
I mean, just to put it in context, we appreciate that the Supreme Court ruling, while clarifying things for women, has created a lot of difficulties and stresses, which we've heard about, for our trans and non-binary comrades. And we support the need to take stock and look at where we go next. There's no doubt that we all need to evaluate the impact, not just for individuals, but for employers and for unions. And we totally recognise...
Kate, could you ask the question, please, on the point of order? Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So, specifically, I just want clarification that the call to resist attempts by management to change any positive existing policies to reduce trans and non-binary rights, that could be seen as encouraging management to go against their legal duties under the Supreme Court ruling. I'm really looking for clarification that that's not the intent of the composite, as this could have potential legal jeopardy implications for unions.
Thanks, Kate. Thank you for your question.
So, thank you.
I'm going to ask Michael to come in and respond to that, Congress. Michael, do you want to respond to that question?
My quick response to that would be for each employer to take that legal judgment and make that decision on the basis of the legal advice that they get.
Thanks, Michael. Thank you. Colleagues, that was emergency motion U, legal protection for gender identity and trans rights, covering emergency motion 4 and 8. Please note that the General Council recommends support. I'll now move you to the vote. All those in favour of emergency... thank you. Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you. Emergency motion U, legal protection for gender identification and trans rights, covering emergency motions 4 and 8 is carried. Congress, breathe. Congress, I now would ask Richard Hardy, Vice President, if he could move the vote of thanks. Thank you, Richard.
Thanks, Chair. Congress, we had originally asked a delegate from the Magicians' Union to do the vote of thanks, but they've done a vanishing act, and I'm afraid that you're very much stuck with me for quite a long time. Congress, I want to give a very special thanks to all of the STU staff for organising, delivering a very successful Congress. It's only when you sit on the top table that you realise just how much work goes into what goes on behind those doors. And on top of delivering for us, they're also dealing with the world that's outside these four walls, because that doesn't stop the work of the STUC. So thank you very much to Ros and all of her staff for that. Thank you to Claire, Barry and Alan and all of the staff here at the Caird Hall for their support and work in the run-up to and during Congress. We would also like to thank Dave, Brendan and the rest of the team from Story and Stage for all their AV and digital support. Standing Orders Committee of Willie Doherty, Jackson Cullinan and Kevin Buchanan. All of the wonderful tellers, coordinated by our new Chief Teller, Stuart Graham. Our photographer, Fraser Band. Special thanks to all of our exhibitors, several of whom were joining us for the first time this year in Dundee. All the organisations who organised fringe meetings during Congress. A special thank you to Her Excellency the Cuban Ambassador and to all of the other guests who have joined us. To our amazing BSL interpreters, Leslie Crerar and Margaret Kinsman. Every year I stand in awe of everything that Leslie and Margaret do, so thank you ever so much for that remarkable job. To our live captioners, Andrew, Julie and Caroline, who have also done such a wonderful job keeping up with us over the past 3 days. To the STUC General Council, although that does seem slightly self-serving, seeing as I'm on it. Big thank you to all of you, to all of your delegation leaders and to all delegates, because without you and without the branches that provide you with motions and the unions that provide you with motions to come here, we wouldn't have a Congress. So give yourselves a big round of applause. And lastly, before she shoots me for going over time again, to our amazing President, Lillian Macer. I think you'll all agree she's chaired Congress brilliantly. It's been really enjoyable sharing the top table with her. So Lillian, we have a gift for you on behalf of the STUC.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you very much for that. Just to add my thank you as well for the support over the last 3 days. We have set our policy. We have a clear direction of inclusion, equality, tolerance, fairness and social justice in Scotland and beyond. Congress, I am delighted to advise you that Richard Hardy, who, by the way, it's his fault we run over time, has been elected as your STUC President for Session 25-26. I am delighted also to advise that Jenny Douglas has been elected as your Vice President. Congratulations both. Congress. I close Congress. Thank you. Safe travels.